macaroni salad. That's right, I cannot believe this many summers have come and gone, and I have not shared my take on this iconic summer side dish. I mean, I shudder to think what you've been using instead. No offense. So I apologize for the delay, but hopefully after you see and taste how awesome this comes out, all will be forgiven. So let's go ahead and get started with the dressing. And one of the keys to a great macaroni salad is to do the dressing first. For reasons I'll explain in a second. So we're going to start with some mayonnaise. And of course we're going to use real, full-fat mayonnaise. And to the mayonnaise we'll add a couple spoons of Dijon mustard. To be honest, the yellow mustard seems to be more traditional, but I really do like the Dijon better here. So a little bit of mustard. And then we're also going to need some vinegar. And for this I'm recommending plain white distilled vinegar. And it's not like you're going to wreck this using a different vinegar. But really this is just in here for the acidity. And I think we want something that has a neutral flavor. And then we'll need to season this up a little bit with a shake of cayenne pepper, as well as some freshly ground black pepper, and of course some salt. And we'll take a whisk and we'll mix that up, and that is basically the base of the dressing for this macaroni salad. Except for one key, crucial, and controversial ingredient, sugar. So while it is true that your classic American deli-style macaroni salad does use sort of a sweet dressing, I find that the most popular recipes out there call for way too much. Like a half a cup or 2/3 of a cup of sugar. So I'm only going to call for 1 or 2 tablespoons, which I think provides plenty of sweetness, especially since we're going to add lots of sweet vegetables. And once that's all mixed together, the liquid portion of our dressing's done, and we have to move on to the solids, also known as our diced veggies. So we'll start with a whole bunch of finely diced celery, as well as some grated carrot, and then we want a little bit of onion in this, and I'm going to use the white and light green parts of some scallions, but just regular onion will work fine. And then for color, sweetness, and a little bitterness, we're definitely going to do some pepper. And I'm going to use several kinds. I'm going to go with some red bell pepper, and then also some green pepper in the form of poblano and jalapeno. And then we'll take a spatula and we'll mix this up. And I really think it's important we do this step before we cook our pasta. Okay, because these vegetables are almost going to get like a quick pickling in this dressing. Okay, the salt, the sugar, the acid is going to pull liquid out of those vegetables. It's going to sort of firm up and crisp up the texture. And I really do think it makes a little bit of a difference. And besides, no one can really prove otherwise. And once that's mixed, we'll just pop that in the fridge while we prepare our macaroni. And I'm just going to leave that spatula right in there because we are going to use that to mix the salad up. So we'll pop that in the fridge and move on to our elbow macaroni. So what we have here is 1 pound of elbow macaroni. That's about 4 cups. And we are going to cook this in some generously salted boiling water. And I said cook, not undercook. We're going to cook this all the way, just like as if we were going to eat this hot. I don't have any idea who came up with the notion that you're supposed to undercook pasta for a salad, but it's just not true. Unless you want a horrible gummy texture macaroni salad. I mean, who knows, maybe you do. But assuming you want an enjoyable texture, I recommend cooking it the full time, at which point we're going to drain that very well. So let's pour that into a colander to let it drain. And do not, under any circumstances, rinse this pasta. For this particular salad, that is the biggest mistake you could make. So don't do it. Just let this sit and drain for about 5 minutes. And every so often, I want you to give it the old shake-a, which is going to help knock off some of that water. And once we're convinced our macaroni is very well drained, we will transfer that into a large mixing bowl and proceed with probably the most important step of this whole process, the tossing and cooling of the macaroni. What we'll do is we'll take our spatula from the dressing, and we'll use that to toss this macaroni occasionally until it cools down to just about room temp. And while we're using the spatula from the dressing, we're definitely not going to add any dressing until this has cooled down. All right, if you add a mayonnaise-based dressing to hot macaroni, what you'll end up with is a very greasy macaroni salad. And what's going to happen here is you're tossing and cooling, a very fine layer of starch is going to form on each one of those pieces of macaroni, and that thin layer of starch has been proven to more effectively grab on and hold on to that mayonnaise-based dressing. It's true, they've done studies. Where? The Mayo Clinic. But anyway, like I said, we want to cool that down to about room temperature. And if everything's gone according to plan, those pieces of macaroni should just be tacky enough to stick to your hand. So that's perfect right there. And yes, I will stop touching the macaroni now. And at this point, finally, we can go ahead and add our dressing. And as you're mixing this, if you're thinking, man, this is way too much dressing, seems kind of wet, don't worry. Because you prepped your macaroni properly, by the time this is ready to serve, it's going to be fully and perfectly absorbed. Trust me. And by the way, we're not going to taste it at this point. Okay, we don't want to season this until that macaroni has fully absorbed the dressing and it's at the temperature we're going to serve it. So what we'll do is we'll wrap it up and we'll pop it in the fridge for at least 4 hours, but overnight is best. Which is how long I left mine in the fridge. And then the next day when we pull it out, it should look something like this. And as predicted, all our dressing has been perfectly absorbed. And what I like to do at this point is take the spatula and give it a nice mix so we can really see what we have. And while you can definitely serve it like this, I generally like to freshen it up a little bit with another small spoon of mayonnaise and just a little touch of cold water. Just like a tablespoon or two, just drizzle it in, and we'll give that a mix. And while that's really not going to significantly change the characteristics of the salad, it is, like I said, going to give it a little bit of a fresher look. So you decide. You are the Tony of your macaroni. So that kind of stuff's up to you. And then once our salad has been tossed and freshened up, the last and most important step, we have to taste for seasoning. So I gave mine a taste and it was perfect. And at that point, we'll transfer it into some kind of serving container. And by the way, because this salad is so naturally beautiful and fresh looking, it does not need any garnish. Unless, of course, you want people to share it on social media, which in that case, you better top it with some green onions. You think someone's going to pin this with no garnish on top? I don't think so. So I did a little green onion for the final touch, and that's it. My take on the classic all-American macaroni salad is done. And I realize taste is subjective, but for me, this is just the epitome of the classic American macaroni salad. Slightly but not too sweet, with just the right level of acidity, and a very generous amount of vegetables, as well as a beautiful, silky, creamy mouthfeel because we didn't dress that macaroni hot. But anyway, that's it. My version of the classic American macaroni salad. And of course, this is going to pair beautifully with anything you barbecue, grill, or smoke this summer. I probably should have done that in a different order. But anyway, the point is, I really hope you give this a try soon. So head over to foodwishes.com for all the ingredient amounts and more info as usual. And as always, enjoy. Hello, this is Chef John from foodwishes.com with Waldorf Salad. That's right, I'm going to show you my take on America's most famous fruit salad. And for whatever reason, if you've never had one of these before, you are in for a huge treat. This thing is just a triumph of taste and texture. I mean, do you have any idea how delicious a fruit salad has to be to actually get a name? That's not easy. So that should tell you something. So let me go ahead and show you my version for this. And first up, we're going to prep the celery. But we're not going to use regular stalk celery. We are going to use celery root, which looks like this. And what we're going to do to prep this, we're going to cut the top off. And yes, absolutely, I'm going to save that and use it for regular stalk celery. And then we'll also trim off the bottom, although I cut off way too much. And then if you want, you can peel this with a regular vegetable peeler. But that surface is kind of gnarly, so I like to just go around with a knife like this, kind of shaving off that skin. And we're going to go all the way around, as well as trim up the bottom, until basically we just have that white root. And once that's been trimmed up, what we'll do is we'll cut like 1/4-inch slices. And then we'll take those slices and cut them into about 1/4-inch sticks. And you know what? Let's go ahead and live dangerously and do 2 at once, thereby doubling our production speed. And once we've cut those into sticks, as you well know, all we need to do is turn them and cut them into nice, fairly even cubes. So we will cube up our celery roots. And once that's done, what we'll do is we'll toss it in some cold water and just let it sit there while we're prepping our other ingredients. And this is not so much to prevent discoloration, but I want those cubes to be fully hydrated. And also I think that water might leach away just a little bit of the bitterness, but I can't prove it. But anyway, regardless, I'm going to leave mine in some cold water and move on to the next thing you want to prep ahead of time, your walnuts. So we're going to toast a handful of walnut pieces in a dry pan over medium heat. Just throw them in and toss them around until basically they smell like toasted walnuts. And it's really not that easy to see on camera here, but they are going to turn a little bit golden. And you might see a few brown marks here and there, but we don't want to go too far. If they get dark brown, they're going to be too bitter. So like I said, the best indication is just toss those around in the dry pan until they sort of smell like toasted walnuts. At which point we'll transfer those onto a plate to cool, because of course the last thing you want on your salad is hot nuts. So we will set those aside and let them cool off, while we move on to the next thing on the prep list, the dressing, which is ridiculously simple. So in a bowl, we're going to start with 3 parts mayonnaise, to which we're going to add 1 part sour cream or creme fraiche. And I think it's pretty obvious which one I'm using. And then to that, we're going to add a little bit of sugar, just a couple pinches, as well as a pinch of salt, a little touch of freshly ground black pepper, and then of course, so everything tastes better, a little touch of cayenne. And then to finish this off, we're going to add the juice of half a lemon, of course freshly squeezed. What kind of crazy person with access to fresh lemons is using this stuff in the bottle? And then last but not least, a little bit of freshly chopped tarragon, my all-time favorite seafood herb, is also my favorite all-time fruit salad herb. And then we'll go ahead and mix that together, and our super simple but insanely delicious Waldorf salad dressing is done. So we'll give that a little whisking, and then of course taste for seasoning. And because this is going to get tossed with other ingredients, it is hard to know for sure, but you are going to want to taste it anyway. I mean, it's sitting right there. And once our salad dressing is set, we are ready to move to final assembly. So the main ingredient in this salad is fresh apples, and this is how I suggest you prep them. So we're going to take our apple and cut it right down the middle, and then we'll cut each of those halves in half to make quarters. And then this is how I like to remove the core. We'll just turn that piece like this, and then using our knife at about a 45-degree angle, we'll just make one little cut right there, and that core, or at least 25% of it, is going to be gone. So a very quick and easy technique to remove those seeds. And then once we have our apple quartered and cored, we will simply slice those wedges lengthwise and cut them into whatever size chunks we want. So that is the official Food Wishes technique. So we'll go ahead and toss our apples in a bowl, to which we can add our very well-drained celery root cubes. I'm also going to do some green grapes, which I've quartered. Seedless green grapes. Please do not use the ones with seeds. Instead of making a Waldorf salad, you'll make an annoying salad. Then we'll also toss in our now cooled toasted walnut pieces. And that's it. Do not screw this salad up by trying to be creative and throw a bunch of extra stuff in. Some people put in dried fruit and things like that, but I'm not into it. The only other thing we're going to put in here is our dressing. And we do want our fruit coated, but we don't want it totally swimming in the dressing. So what I'll do is I'll throw some in and mix it up, and then evaluate. So that's what I'm doing right now. I'm staring at it, thinking to myself, Chef John, you need a little more dressing. That's what I call myself in my head. So I tossed in another spoon and gave it a mix. And once that's mixed up and we feel like we have the perfect amount of dressing, all we need to do is give it a taste, make sure everything's just right, and then we have options. We can serve this immediately, which I actually enjoy, or you can wrap that up and put it in the fridge for up to 24 hours. This actually holds surprisingly well. And then as far as how to serve it, you have so many options. As you saw, it made a beautiful base for some pan-roasted chicken breasts, but this is also a terrific side dish for things like roast turkey or pork chops. Very nice with this. But having said all that, I think my favorite way to enjoy this is just in a bowl, just as a simple standalone fruit salad. So that's how I'll be finishing this video off. Just serving that up as is, with maybe a couple sliced grapes for a little color contrast. And of course, a few extra toasted walnuts aren't going to hurt anything. And that's it, our Waldorf salad is done. So let me go ahead and dig in. And like I said, I just love the combination of taste and textures here. Sweet, crunchy, tangy, just really, really fantastic. And while I do enjoy Waldorf salad just using regular celery stalks, I think by using the root we get a little more interesting, a little more mild flavor. But yet it still has enough of that bitter celery flavor to bring out the sweetness in the other fruit, which really is what makes this salad so delicious. But anyway, that's it, my take on the venerable Waldorf salad, which, as you may have guessed by the name, was invented at the Waldorf Astoria Hotel in New York back in the day. So while this is a very old salad, it is still very relevant, and by relevant, I mean incredibly delicious and easy to make. So I really do hope you give this a try soon. Head over to foodwishes.com for all the ingredient amounts and more info as usual. And as always, enjoy. Hello, this is Chef John from foodwishes.com with Perfect Potato Salad. That's right, I'm going to show you what I think is the best way to make perfect potato salad, which, by the way, should not be confused with the perfect way to make the best potato salad, since who even knows what that means? So what I'm hoping to do here is just simply show you the best methods and practices, and possibly techniques, for making a potato salad that's going to be perfect. And by perfect, of course we mean perfect for you. So with that, let's go ahead and get started with the first huge tip, and that would be to boil the potatoes whole with the skin on. And for me, the best choice is 4 very large russet potatoes. These are roughly about 12 ounces each. And since we are going to cook these whole, it's very important to try to get ones that are the same size. Okay, so ignore those dirty looks at the market. I want you to go through that whole bin and find 4 potatoes that are the same weight and shape. And then above and beyond selection, another super important factor here is that we cook these in heavily salted water. Yes, that heavily salted. So believe it or not, that was a 1/4 cup of kosher salt, which may look like a crazy amount, but that really is how much we need. And then what we'll do is go ahead and cover these in some nice fresh cold water. And yes, in case you're wondering, this technique's going to work with any variety of potato. It just won't be as good. Okay, when I'm making a salad, I want a potato that has a starchy, absorbent texture, and not something that's firm and waxy. So that's why the russet's my top choice, followed by, I guess, Yukon Gold. But anyway, no matter what you're using, what we'll do is bring that up to a boil over high heat, at which point we'll reduce our heat to medium-low to maintain a nice steady simmer. And then all we're going to do is simply cook those potatoes until they're tender, which I believe took me about 40 minutes or so. But of course that's going to depend on the size. So instead of going by time, what we'll do is test these. And for this, I'll use this metal skewer. And we'll test those by giving them the old poka. And I'm happy to report mine were perfect. Not firm, not soft and mushy, but just perfectly tender. And then what we're going to do once we've determined our potatoes have cooked long enough is go ahead and transfer those to a plate, because the next step may be the most important. And that's letting these cool down to room temp before we work with them. All right, we never want to dress hot potatoes with a mayonnaise-based dressing, since we may end up with something that looks greasy and unappetizing. Having said that, working with cold refrigerated potatoes isn't great either. So letting these cool down to room temp is ideal. So we'll simply move those off the stove and maybe in front of an open window, and we'll let those cool completely. And while we're waiting, it's probably a good idea to go ahead and mix up our dressing, which, as I mentioned, and as you can see, is mayonnaise-based. And real mayonnaise, please. I mean, you can use fat-free mayonnaise, just not for potato salad. And then to that, we will add some apple cider vinegar, or of course the vinegar of your choice. And then we'll also toss in a couple spoons of mustard. I'm going with Dijon, but just some good old-fashioned American yellow mustard will work. And then we will finish this up by seasoning with some salt, as well as some freshly ground black pepper. And then last but not least, a little bit of cayenne. And that's going to be it for this very simple dressing. We'll go ahead and grab our whisk and give that a mix. And as soon as that's all combined, it's ready to use with our potatoes, assuming that they're room temp. Okay, if you only remember one thing from this video, besides cooking the potatoes whole with a lot of salt, it's that we don't want to use this dressing on the potatoes if they're still warm or hot. So if you happen to finish this dressing and your potatoes are still cooling, just simply transfer it into the fridge. And then what we'll do once our potatoes are room temp is peel them by simply scraping off the skin, which is not only going to be really easy, we're also going to waste like zero amount of potato. And then just one little heads up, since we did cook these with the skin on, there's going to be a little bit of discoloration under the skin, which really affects nothing. It's just an appearance thing. So once we've removed the skin, if there's a few dark spots you want to scrape off, or a couple little eyes or whatever to clean up, go ahead. And then what we'll do once these are peeled is cut them up into pieces roughly 3 times the size that we want the pieces of potato in our salad to be at the end. And that might have been confusing. So let me say that again, in hopefully a less confusing way. Since these potatoes are going to break up as we mix our salad together, I don't like to start off by cutting these up too small. All right, so my theory is whatever size we cut them up at this point, they're going to be like a third or a quarter of this size by the time the salad's done. And yes, it absolutely helps if you throw your pinky out while you're doing this. It acts as a counterbalance and also looks quite elegant. And then once our potatoes are cut, we'll transfer those into a large mixing bowl, at which point we can proceed to final assembly. Again, assuming that these are room temp. And if they're not, let them cool more. But mine were good, so I'm going to proceed with the rest of the ingredients, which for me is going to start with a little touch of finely diced sweet onion. And by the way, onion's a controversial ingredient, so I'm going to spend an entire paragraph about that in the blog post. So the onion's optional, but the rest of these ingredients are not. So we're definitely going to want to toss in some diced celery, as well as some freshly chopped Italian parsley. And then we'll also toss in some chopped hard-boiled egg, which I will not be chopping up, but rather using one of these slicers. So we'll slice it one way and then the other. And I guess if you wanted, you could turn it on its side and cut it a third time. But I don't, because just like the potato, these are going to break up as we mix. Speaking of which, once we've added the last of our ingredients, I like to take a big spoon and give this a mix before I add the dressing, which, to be completely honest, may be an unnecessary step. All right, I really don't know if this comes out any better than if we had just thrown the dressing in now. But none of that matters to me because it feels right. And above and beyond giving these ingredients a little bit of a head start getting combined, I'm also able to start breaking up these potatoes without being distracted by the dressing. Okay, so we'll give that a quick stir, kind of breaking up those bigger pieces of potato as we do. At which point, finally, we can add our dressing and continue mixing. Oh, and by the way, if you happen to be thinking to yourself, as soon as this is mixed up, I bet we can eat. Well, no. I have some very disappointing news. Unfortunately, there's no way to properly finish seasoning this and checking the texture until it's thoroughly chilled. So go ahead and taste it if you want, but we're just not going to get an accurate reading if this is room temp. So what we'll do after we mix that up is cover it with some plastic, and transfer it in the fridge for at least 2 or 3 hours, or until thoroughly chilled. So that's what I did. And a few hours later, mine looked like this. Speaking of which, this always looks terrible until you mix it up again. So relax, it gets better. And what we'll do is grab a fork and give it a taste. And we're checking for 2 things. Does it need more salt? Which it always does. So I'm going to toss them in. And then also we're determining, does it need a little more mayonnaise? So if it seems a little bit dry, I like to throw another spoon in, which I almost always do. And then we'll go ahead and give that a mix, and we'll give it one final taste. And one thing I should have mentioned by now, because this video is mostly focusing on techniques and methods, don't think you have to use all the ingredients I used, or only the ingredients I used. Okay, as long as you use the proper techniques, you can add anything you want to this. You know, things like pickles and peppers, stuff like that. Okay, so when it comes to the ingredients, it's up to you to determine what makes your potato salad valid. And if you like it, pretty much anything goes. But anyway, once that's all set, we'll go ahead and transfer that into something slightly more attractive. And maybe finish with a little bit of fresh chive. And then because every potato salad I ever made in every cafeteria and deli I ever worked was always garnished with a little bit of paprika on top, I'm going to do the same, except with cayenne. And that's it. That is now officially ready to enjoy at your picnic or cookout. Except I don't have one of those on the schedule. So I'm just going to eat mine standing in the kitchen, which is fine. And of course, normally at this point, I would brag about how good it tastes. But like I said, this was just outlining the method, and I'm not exactly sure what you're going to put in yours. But having said that, if you do use the same ingredients, this comes out really good. And for me, it's like the epitome of a classic American potato salad, which I learned from my mother, Pauline. May she rest in peace. Which reminds me, if you're one of these super fans working on the trivia game, potato salad is the first food I can remember eating. Apparently, it was one of my favorite and first baby foods. So whether you have a picnic coming up, or maybe just some hungry babies around, I really do hope you give this a try soon. So head over to foodwishes.com for all the ingredient amounts and more info as usual. And as always, enjoy. Hello, this is Chef John from foodwishes.com with how I like to do my corn on the cob. That's right, I should have shown you this a couple months ago. Well, actually, forget that. I should have shown it about 6 years ago because this is such a great technique and by far the easiest way to do corn on the cob. And if you're thinking, Chef John, I already know how to cook corn on the cob. Even I can do that. Well, I know any fool can cook an ear of corn. No offense. But that's not really what this tip's about. This technique has to do with dealing with this, corn silk, the bane of our corn on the cob eating existence. So whether we're talking about removing this before we cook the corn or after we cook the corn, it's generally kind of an annoying, messy task. But if you use this method, that's not going to be the case. So step 1, we're going to cook this ear of corn in the microwave. So I'm going to head over to my microwave cabinet and pop in that ear of corn. And for my microwave, about 3.5 minutes is perfect. Oh, by the way, microwave makers, stop putting so many buttons on these. I mean, inverter, turbo, defrost. What is that? We don't need that, okay? But anyway, we're going to set that for 3.5 minutes, or in my case, 3:33. So I save time not having to move my finger to the 0. But basically 3.5 minutes. And of course, you could just space out and watch that turn. But I always like to be productive, so I decided to work on my only dance move for a couple minutes. Hey, if you're only going to have one move, it's got to be perfect. And by the way, this method will work even if you're not microwaving. So even if you decide to grill that corn in the husk, this is still going to work. And then when the time's up, we're going to remove that ear of corn. Use a towel, of course. It's very hot. And I'm going to bring that over to the cutting board so you can watch the magic. So I'm going to turn the ear this way. I want to grip it on the tapered end. And we're going to take a sharp, possibly serrated knife and cut off the bottom inch of the cob. And the reason we're doing that is because that corn silk runs from the top all the way to that end. And by cutting there, we've now released every one of those little threads. And then all we need to do is grab that towel and kind of squeeze that tapered end, kind of push that hot cob out of the husk. And because we're gripping that tapered end, where all that corn silk comes together, that ear of corn is going to come out of that husk with virtually no corn silk attached. And I say virtually because you might get 1 or 2 rogue pieces, but for all intents and purposes, it really does come out perfect. Although technically, this is not perfect until we get some butter and salt on it. So that will be our final and predictable scene. A little bit of butter, a little bit of salt, and I'm ready to enjoy this cob silk-free. And above and beyond that, it makes this desilking technique super easy. The other nice thing about microwaving an ear of corn in the husk is it stays hot forever. This was like way too hot to eat. This was one of the more painful videos I've done lately. Mostly because I couldn't find those little things you stick in the ends of the corn. I don't even remember what those are called. Corn holders? That doesn't sound right. But anyway, that's it. Just a nice little short techniques video I cobbed together. I was in a little bit of a rush this morning. I have to go see a colonel about a problem he's having with his ears, so there's just no time for any corny jokes or puns. But I really do hope you give this a try. So head over to foodwishes.com for there's no ingredients, but there's always more info as usual. And as always, enjoy. Hello, this is Chef John from foodwishes.com with shrimp and pasta shell salad. That's right, I like a macaroni salad just as much as the next guy not on the paleo diet. And when I want to make that salad just a little extra special, nothing does the trick like some small sweet shrimp. So that's what we're going to do here. This is one of my favorite summer salads and oh so easy. So step one here, we're going to prep our dressing. Always a good idea when you're doing a cold potato or pasta salad, do your dressing ahead of time. So we're going to start with mayonnaise as the base. We're going to throw in a spoon of Dijon mustard or any mustard you have access to. And then just a little bit of ketchup for a little touch of acidity and a tiny bit of color. We're also going to add a few drops of Worcester sauce, some salt, and a little bit of cayenne. And yes, for me, that's a little. Of course, that's up to you. You are the boss of how big little is, but you should put some in there. And after the cayenneization, we're going to go ahead and squeeze in the juice of 1 lemon. You're going to need some acidity. If you want to use vinegar, of course you can, but lemon, just a natural pairing with the shrimp. And then we're going to put in a whole bunch of freshly chopped dill, also known as my second favorite herb with shrimp. And you longtime viewers probably know that tarragon is my all-time favorite seafood herb, but dill is fantastic in this, very traditional. So we're going with dill this time, but you could use tarragon or a combination. And at that point, the dressing's done. We're going to take a whisk and we're going to mix that up. And once that's thoroughly combined, just go ahead and put that in the fridge until the rest of your salad ingredients are prepped, which is not going to take long. Of course, we're going to have to boil some pasta shells. So I'm going to put on a big pot of water on high heat, and we're going to salt it thoroughly. Huge rookie mistake when making pasta or macaroni salad, not salting the water enough. All right, the Italians say it should taste like seawater. And by Italians, I'm talking about my wife, Michelle. She always says that. In fact, she will actually taste the water with a spoon. I love when she does that. So you need way more than a pinch. You need a big old spoon of salt in there. And once that comes to a boil, we're going to dump in our pasta shells, and you're going to cook them all the way. Don't undercook your pasta. If you're making a salad, it won't have a nice texture. So cook it the full time, after which we're going to drain it, and then we're going to do something we almost never do. We're going to rinse it a little bit. I'm just going to spray this with cold water for about 10 seconds. I just want to take away most of that heat. It's okay if it's warm. I just don't want it hot when we mix it with the dressing. So just rinse it for a few seconds, and then just let it sit there and drain while we prep our shrimp. And I had 1 pound of these beautiful pink shrimp. All right, these are the 100 to a pound size. These are not bay shrimp, which is what you traditionally use for this salad. Bay shrimp are about half the size. So what I'm going to do is cut these in half. I think it's worth a couple minutes investment in time to cut those up a little bit. It's just going to mix into the salad much better. If you don't want to do it, by all means, skip this step. But I'm going to cut them up, and I'm doing them exactly in half. You don't have to be so careful. If you just wanted to take a knife and rough chop them, that would work. Or cut a bunch at once, that would work. All right, you can't really screw up this part, okay? So cut them, don't cut them, whatever. At that point, we're going to transfer our now fully drained pasta shells into a mixing bowl along with the shrimp. Of course, it's illegal to make a pasta salad in the U.S. without adding diced celery, so we got to add some of that. I'm also going to add a nice fine dice of red bell pepper. All right, it's going to add some nice bitter sweetness and also some beautiful color. And then we're going to pour in our already made dressing and give that a thorough mixing. And I mean thorough. See, if you just mix it for a minute or two, you're going to have pasta shells that are not coated with the sauce. In fact, I want them more than coated. I want that sauce going inside the shell. So I really want you to spatulate that quite thoroughly. And once you are confident that's perfectly mixed, we're going to go ahead and throw some plastic on it and throw it in the fridge for at least 2 or 3 hours. You really want to let this sit, soak up that dressing, soak up those flavors before the final seasoning and final adjusting, okay? So we're going to wrap it up, put it in the fridge for a few hours. This is what mine look like. We're going to take the spatula, give it a nice mix, and we're going to check for a couple of things. Seasoning, obviously, but we're also going to check to see if we might need more mayo. And it usually does need another little spoon, but I was kind of surprised. Mine seemed to be perfect. So I didn't add any, and I moved on to the tasting and adjusting of the seasonings. And I decided I wanted a little more lemon, a little more salt, and a little more cayenne. And as you well know, we always want to season at the temperature we're going to serve the food. So that's why I'm going to do the final adjustments at this point. So some lemon, some cayenne, some salt. We're going to give that one last mix, and we're ready to serve. That's it. Shrimp and pasta shell salad. You could do this as a side dish. You can throw it on some greens and make a lunch out of it. You can garnish with a little bit of paprika or cayenne. It'll give it that little shellfish blush. By the way, if you're looking for a name for your garage band, Shellfish Blush, you could do worse. And last but not least, maybe a little sprig of dill. All right, make it nice. There you go. And that, my friends, is a beautiful and very simple seafood salad. And as you can see, I kept mine fairly basic. There's lots of stuff you could add to this. Some people like to put onions, capers, olives. Who said bacon? Good call, that would be delicious. And also, you didn't hear this from me, but this is a base for a piece of grilled salmon. Just beautiful. But bottom line, just a really simple and delicious salad to make. Just make sure your water's salted, your pasta's not undercooked, and you let it sit for a few hours before finishing it up. All right? So I really hope you give this a try. Head over to foodwishes.com for all the ingredient amounts and more info as usual. And as always, enjoy.